everyone, welcome back. My name's Diana. This is my channel Bookish Di, and today I am wrapping up my reading in the month of April. So for folks who watch my channel, I had a relatively ambitious April TBR. I had books picked out for all the different prompts for the Magical Readathon, and I was also going to be doing Tome, Topple. And while I didn't finish all the Magical Readathon prompts, I did read 2 tomes, and I did complete 8 for Tome Topple, and I did complete 8 prompts for Magical Readathon, enough to either get the healer profession or the Master of Elements profession. So let's get into it. The first book that I read in the month of April was Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma. This was for the alchemy prompt for the Magical Readathon, which is to read a book featuring a romance. And so this is Indian American romance starring centering Karina and Dr. Prem, and it's inspired by Taming the Shrew / 10 Things I Hate About You. And it starts where Karina decides that, she wants to start dating again. She wants to date for love. She believes in love. And her timeline gets accelerated because she finds out that her dad is planning on moving to Florida and selling the house that her mom designed and rebuilt. And Karina, and the only way he's going to essentially allow Karina to buy the house is if she gets engaged or married by the time he's ready. And then we have Prem, who does not believe in love, and he hosts this kind of community access television show centering health in the Southeast Asian community. And he and Karina meet, and they try to hook up, and sparks fly, but then it ends badly, and then they have a run-in at Prem's community television show, and it goes from there. So this I liked parts of. So I did like the chemistry between Prem and Karina. I thought that Nisha Sharma did a really good job capturing that and making you really get the sense that these two people like each other. I also really liked Karina's aunts. So her aunties play a big role on her side of the story, and I really enjoyed that relationship because Karina's mom had died like a decade or so previously, and so her aunties are filling in this kind of maternal aspect for her and helping her, be connected to her mom. And I also really liked Karina's friends, one of whom is going to be starring in the next book in this series. However, the things I didn't like, there were times where Prem just felt a little pushy, and I didn't always, it was a little odd. And then the other thing that really kind of bugged me was one of the side plots in this story is Karina's sister is getting married, and she's like this influencer. She also teaches math, and she's just really selfish and self-absorbed, and stuff happens towards the end. And I didn't really feel like the resolution with that plot line was really well done, and I really wanted there to be more of a reckoning. Also with Karina and her dad, I kind of wanted there to be more. I wasn't wholly satisfied with the resolution of that plot. And then the last thing that kind of bugged me about this book was, oh God, Prem named his dick, and it comes up during the sex scenes, and it is incredibly jarring, and it feels so out of place. And it was just, what were you thinking? Why didn't your agent ding this? Why didn't your editor ding? Like, I don't know what was going through Nisha Sharma's head when she wrote that, but I was just like, ooh, no. So I ended up giving this 3 stars out of 5. It was an enjoyable time. I didn't hate, the things that I liked about this book outweighed the things that annoyed me about this book. And I definitely plan on requesting the next book in the series, which is going to be like I said, on one of Karina's friends for the female lead and one of Prem's friends for the male lead. And it's centered on Much Ado About Nothing, which is one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. So I'm very interested to see how this book is going to work. The next book that I read was Penrick's Mission by Lois McMaster Bujold. I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Grover Gardner, and this was for the Magical Readathon Prompt Restoration, which centers on healing or a doctor. Anyway, so this is the fourth book in the Penrick and Desdemona cycle. It follows Penrick, who is on a mission to recruit a general from a rival empire, and things go pear-shaped, and he has to, one, figure out how he's going to be getting out, two, try and figure out like what's going on with the general, and then three, get the general and his half-sister, Naikis, out of the country because they're at risk of getting killed by the people in charge. So this is a lot of fun. It feels like more of the Bujold hijinks that I'm familiar with from reading the Vorkosigan saga. So Penrick and Miles are very different characters. However, they do have like the central thing of like being able to think quickly on their feet and being able to try and adapt to whatever situation they find themselves in. I also really liked Naikis. So she's the second point of view character in this story. So she is a widow who is trying to get her brother out of prison when this starts. Her brother's the general that Penrick is trying to recruit. And we get sparks fly between her and Penrick, which I will say Bujold definitely has a type for her romantic interest for her male leads, because this is the second busty widow that one of her heroes has fallen in love with, because you also have a Katrin Vasorian in the Vorkosigan saga. Anyway, I just find that very like notable that Bujold has a type of romantic lead. Anyway, so I really like that. I continue to love Penrick and Desdemona's relationship and how they play off of each other. And we also get a little bit more of an insight into how the magic works. I will say, content warning for mention of past suicidal ideation. Part of the reason Penrick is on this mission is he got reassigned duties because he had been working as a healer and he was only given like really bad cases that a lot of times he couldn't save, and it wore down on his mental health. And he does talk about that in this book. But yeah, this was so much fun. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I continue to really enjoy the series, and I have another one coming up towards the end of this month that I'll talk about later. But yeah, if you want fantasy that's like a bite size, I highly recommend these books. They're just so much fun. They're such a delight. Following that, I read another piece of short fiction. This was A Dead Gin and Curio by P. Jelly Clark. This was for the Prompt Elemental Studies, which was to read a book under 100 pages. So this was a novelette that was published in 2016, and it follows an investigator, Fatima, who is looking into a dead djinn, and along the way she uncovers a conspiracy that might end the world. So I enjoy this. I've read some other short fiction by Clark in the past. I really enjoyed Ring Shout as well as Black God's Drums, and so this is my first experience in the Dead Gin and Curio verse, because he has another novella as well as the full-length novel, and I liked this. I really enjoyed Fatima as a character. I thought the world building in this little novelette was really interesting. So for background, decades before this novelette starts, someone has connected like the earth with other realms, and so jinn and these creatures that claim to be angels come through, and there's ghouls and magic, and it's very like not quite steampunk, but a little bit. Anyway, I really enjoyed the world building. I thought it was really fascinating. Fatima is just also a really great character. She's very sharp and very perceptive, and I really enjoyed the descriptions of how she dressed and how that's such an integral part of who she is and the aura she projects. So I'm very interested in continuing the series. So the next one I think is Haunting of Tramcar 015, and then it's Master of Jinn, which I do plan on reading soon because it is nominated for Hugo for Best Novel. So yeah, I gave this another 4.5 out of 5 stars and really enjoyed it. After that, the next book I read was Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. This is a debut novel, and it was for the Magical Readathon Prompt Astronomy, which was next book on your TBR, and that was just because my hold came in at the library and I knew I needed to read it quickly because Otherwise, I didn't know when I was going to get to it, and this was one that I had been really looking forward to, and I really wanted to make a priority to read. So this is a book that was inspired by a series of Chinese art heists that happened several years, that was profiled, I want to say, in The Atlantic several years ago. And it follows 5 young adults. So you have Will, who is a senior art history major at Harvard, his younger sister Irene, and he's kind of like the mastermind. You have Irene, who serves as more of the grifter role. So she is able to like analyze people and how they react and kind of respond accordingly. You have Daniel, who is also a senior. He's at UCLA and he's training to be a surgeon, and he's being used as like the lockpick type person, as well as the thief. You have the getaway driver, Lily, who's Irene's roommate, who does mechanical engineering, but also drag races on the side. And then finally, you have Alex, who is an MIT dropout, who's currently working at Google and who's serving as the hacker. And so Will recruits these people to steal back 5 pieces of art that was looted from the Summer Palace in Beijing. And yeah, so there were certain things, I think this was a good debut. There were certain things that I liked and certain things that I didn't. In terms of things that I liked, I really liked the character interactions. So I will say, if you're going into this book expecting like a lot of heists, there are some heists in the beginning, but this is a book really, and I'm sorry if the camera's shaking, Leia is rubbing up against my tripod. This is a book that's really focused on what does it mean to be Chinese? What does it mean to be Chinese American? How does being diaspora affect how you view China and how you connect to things like Chinese art? And each character has their own perspective. So like Daniel and Irene, their parents had come over and they were born in the States. You have Alex, whose parents have been in the US for a while. She's from New York, so she grew up in New York's Chinatown. You have Lily, whose parents don't really talk about their past in China, and she's not really connected to it as much as the others. And then you have Daniel, who had moved from Beijing to California with his dad when he was younger and is still he still considers himself to be Chinese and instead of Chinese American. So there's a lot of, that's a huge element of the book. And I would be really interested in reading or seeing some Chinese Americans talking about that, because I can't really speak to how well the author articulated all of those. But so that's a big part. There are some heists, but there's not a whole lot. But like I said, I liked the character dynamics. I thought for the most part, the characters were very interesting. I really liked seeing what their motivations were for getting involved and then staying involved. The one character that I thought that was underdeveloped and made me a little sad was Lily, because you get hints of her relationship with her parents and her relationship with her heritage, but they're compared to the others, it's not much. And I feel like what we see, I feel like where we see her in the epilogue, there's not a lot of build up to how it gets there compared to the others. Like I would say out of the 3 female characters, she feels the most manic pixie dream girly, which isn't bad because you have, Alex and Irene. So she's not like the only one, but it's a little, I don't know, it felt a little disappointing considering how well written Alex and Irene are. And I really liked Alex and Irene. So yeah, it wasn't quite as hasty as I was hoping, but I did enjoy it. I gave it 3.75 out of 5 stars. There's enough in there that I really enjoyed. I'm definitely interested in seeing what else Lee writes in the future, especially, like I said, this was a debut and I thought that it was well done. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed her character work, and I'm very interested to see where she goes next. Following that was my first tome for Tome Topple. I read The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This also fulfilled the prompt inscription for Magical Readathon, which read a book that intimidates you. So this is a silk punk epic fantasy, and the cover copy centers on 2 characters, but there are many characters involved in this book. So it mainly follows Kunigaru, who starts off as like this bureaucrat turned thief turned revolutionary, and then Mata Zindu, who's the last scion of a noble family, and who's like touched by the gods. Like, he has 2 pupils in each eye. He's very tall. He's very strong. And in most epic fantasies, he would be the hero. And there are other characters as well. You have Gia, who is Kuni's wife. You have, God, there's so many characters in this fucking book. You have Luan Xia, who is an ally of Kuni. You have Jin Mizodi, who starts off as basically a street orphan turned general. Anyway, so this book is essentially following the revolution that sees the ouster of an imperial family and installing a new Kuni as the new emperor. And anyway, Leia is being a terrible goose and causing problems on purpose. Anyway, so this is an epic fantasy, still silk punk. So this book has been on my shelf since it came out in 2015. I've had this book on my shelf for 7 years and haven't read it. And I finally decided, it was on my read or unhaul list, which I haven't posted it yet. It's coming up at some point. But it was one where I'm like, I'm going to be reading this year, or else I have to get rid of it because it is taking up so much room. And this was fine. I think, I will say, I think Leia, I think if I hadn't been told that this book, it is one, very different, like reads very different from the other books in the series, and 2, like the second book is just so much better than this, I probably would have either DNF'd this book or just not plan on continuing with this series. So in terms of the good, I really enjoy Ken Liu's writing. I thought that the way he wrote this book was really interesting. It really felt like someone was telling a story where it like goes forward and backwards, and there's a lot of people like weaving in and out. So it feels very epic, and I thought that the structure was very interesting. It didn't read like a lot of epic fantasy that I've read before. I also thought that the themes in this book were very interesting. So one of the things that ends up driving Mata and Kuni apart is their vision for the islands of Daro, where Mata wants to kind of go back to the way things were. He was raised on stories of glory and his ancestors, you know, noble deeds, and he has this vision of, you know, how people having their place and the nobles ruling and the commoners staying put. Whereas Kuni is like, why can't we think of a better future, and is constantly thinking of looking at how people like the actions of people like Mata affect the people, like the common people, so the peasants, the farmers, the fishers. Leia! Anyway, so I thought that the themes for that were very interesting because, like I said, and Mata is kind of our stereotypical epic fantasy hero, you know, in terms of the lost scion of a noble house who's trying to put things back to the way they were, whereas Kuni is more of an upstart. I also really liked the gods and how they were included in the story and how they kind of weave in out and how you can see their presence in different places. So I thought that was interesting. What I didn't like, however, and this is something I have been told by multiple people gets addressed, is I didn't really like the characters all that, like a lot of the side characters, and also the lack of female characters in this book just feels so, it's so glaring. And I know it gets addressed in the next series, but like I said, had I not known, this probably would have been either a DNF or I would have stopped the series after the first book. So I am glad that I waited so long to read it, because had I read this back in 2015, I would not have considered continuing this series. However, it is disappointing. I will also say that this book really reads like a prologue to a larger story, because looking at the cover copy for books 2 through 4 for this series, like those follow different characters, and so this is very much like Ken Liu had a lot of world building notes that he then turned into this novel, just I guess as like an explainer to how the world happened in book 2. So it's, yeah, I do plan on reading Wall of Storms, which is book 2. I don't know when, because it is even bigger than, like, this is 600 plus pages, and Wall of Storms. Are you mad at me? And Wall of Storms is like 800 plus pages. So I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. It's not my favorite. I'm still deciding if I want to unhaul this book or if I want to keep it, because like it is, you know, a first edition hardcover of this book. I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but yeah, I am glad that I finally read this just to say that I did. So it's like one less book on my shelf, my TBR shelf. But yeah, it's fine. Not anything I would recommend at this point. Following that, the next tome that I read was Middle Game by Seanan McGuire. This also fulfilled the Magical Readathon prompt of conjuration, which is to read a book with a source of illumination on the cover. So this is the first in Seanan McGuire's Alchemical Journey series. The second book, Seasonal Fears, is coming out actually the day that I'm recording this video. And so this book follows Roger and Dodger, 2 twins who were created for the purpose of claiming the doctrine of ethos by this man, James Reed, who was in turn created by master alchemist A. Deborah Baker. And it follows Roger and Dodger's journeys growing up together and how they end up connecting and the forces aligned against them and how they eventually, you know, come to claim the doctrine of ethos. So I liked this book. It is not my favorite McGuire book. However, this is very different, and I can understand why it is off, like why some people bounced off it. So this is a book that I think I will gain more on a reread, because there's so much happening that you don't necessarily realize at first. But then you get a sense later on. And yeah, and it's, anyway, so it follows Roger and Dodger. Roger lives in Boston and Dodger lives in Palo Alto, and Roger is very gifted with words and language, and Dodger is all things math. And yeah, there's just so much happening. You also have, like I said, Reed, his right-hand woman, Leia, who is very evil. You also have Aaron, who is the embodiment of order, who works for Reed and Leigh, but has her own agenda, as you find out. And yeah, like I said, I enjoyed this book. Content warning for on-page, or for suicidal ideation. Yeah, I feel like talking too much about this is spoilery, because there's just so much happening. But the crux of it, like a big part of it, is that Roger and Dodger keep finding each other despite the fact that there are forces trying to keep them apart for a very long time. And yeah, I enjoyed this. I would give it 4.25 out of 5 stars, and I definitely plan on reading Seasonal Fears when my pre-order comes in, and I am glad that I finally got around to reading this book. The second to last book that I read in April was for the Magical Readathon prompt Animal Studies, which was quick read, and that was another Penric and Desdemona novella, Mira's Last Dance. So this follows directly after Penric's mission, where Adelis, the general, Penric, and Nycus are trying to make their way to the Duchy of Orbos, where Adelis and Nycus plan on seeking asylum after the events of Penric's mission, and they have to travel through the countryside and without being noticed. And so as part of that, Penric kind of they seek shelter in a brothel, and Penric kind of needing to disguise himself to kind of draw off attention. Penric draws upon the past life of one of Desdemona's prior hosts, Mira, who is a courtesan. And yeah, so I did not like this one as much as Penric's Mission. It is very short. It is like 150 pages. And while I enjoyed the fact where we get to see like the influence of different hosts, so we've mostly been seeing like Ruchia and some of the other temple sorceresses. We haven't really seen someone like Mira who was outside of that and who had a very different life experience. So there was that. But yeah, there was some stuff with Penric becoming Mira that I would like to read more trans or like NB thoughts on this, because I don't think that I can fully speak to that, but there was like a certain extent to, ooh, he's dressing like I don't know. I did like the character stuff with Penric and Nakis, and getting to see a little bit more of the world building. But it was not my favorite. I would say like a 3.75 out of 5. I am really looking forward to the next Penric and Desdemona, but yeah, not my favorite one of the bunch. And then the last book that I read in the month of April was Servant Mage by Kate Elliott, and this fulfilled the shape-shifting prompt, which was an animal with claws on the cover, which is this. And so this novella follows Felian, who is a lamplighter servant mage, so she controls fire, and she gets recruited by a group of monarchists to carry out a mission against the In Power Liberationist group. And their mission ends up changing partway through because they receive news of a new royal baby that they need to rescue. And so Felian goes along with it. So this is one where I'm like, I understand you're trying to do something a little bit different, a little shorter, Kate Elliott, but also this could so easily be like a full-length standalone epic fantasy novel, because there's just so much of Kate Elliott's, trademark world building and character work in this. How long is this? 164 pages. Like, this could easily be a 400 to 500 page book. Like, there's just so much, and we get glimpses of that in terms of the conflict that led to the Liberationists overthrowing the monarchy, and what happened with Felian's past and how she became a servant mage, and what was going on with her family and her community, and then what's going on after the events of this book. So I really enjoyed this, although, like I said, I do wish it was longer. So Felian is a character who has been severely traumatized, and because of her recruitment as essentially being abducted to be a servant mage, and she is kind of regaining her sense of self and like trying to remember, what are her goals, what is she trying to accomplish. And it's very interesting that her goals don't really align with the group that she's traveling with. And it's very interesting to see, because she's essentially a third party in this conflict between the Liberationists and the Monarchists. Like, she's affected, like her community is affected, but they don't believe, they're not necessarily like part of those two groups. So I thought that was very interesting, and I really thought that the magic system that she built with this was cool. So there's 5 elements that people who are mages are associated with. So there's, earth, fire, water, air, and then there's also aether. And then the royals or the monarchs can control all 5. So I thought that was fascinating. But yeah, I want more. I don't think we're getting any more in this world, which is sad because there's just so much, and I want more. Anyway, I enjoyed this. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars, and Tor.com, please give her a full-length novel in this book, in this series. I think it would be so good. So that was my April reading. Nothing below a 3-star, which was good, but no true 5 stars, a couple of 4.5s. But yeah, for the most part, I very much liked what I read. I enjoyed trying out some new to me authors and seeing what's being published, as well as getting some things off my TBR shelf that have been there for a number of years. So did you do the Magical Readathon? If you did, what career did you end up fulfilling the prompts for? Do you like the sound of any of these books? Please let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoy what you see, please like and subscribe, and I will catch you all later. Bye.